The Alpha King insisted. "You have no mate." Her soft answer made him lose control. Fog clung to the undergrowth, curling around mossy stones and fallen logs like pale ghosts. Here, hunters often vanished without a trace, and the villagers of the nearby towns spoke of the cursed woods in hushed tones. But for King Alaric, the Alpha King of Eldrith, this forest was both challenge and sanctuary. Alaric was a figure carved from power itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair like midnight and eyes as sharp as steel, he carried an aura of authority that bent both men and beasts to his will. He had ruled Eldrith for over a decade, feared by enemies and revered by his people. And yet, for all his strength, the king bore a secret weight, a curse upon his bloodline that forbade him from finding a true mate. Each generation of kings had failed to love freely, and the land itself seemed to mourn their unfulfilled destinies. That morning, Alaric led his hunting party deep into the forest, seeking a stag whose antlers were said to shine like silver under the sun. The hunters whispered superstitions as they followed, but the king paid them no mind. His focus was on the forest, on the way the shadows moved, and on the quiet pull of something unseen, as if the woods themselves were waiting. A sudden rustle caught his attention. His hand went to the hilt of his sword, and his eyes scanned the dense underbrush. Then a figure stepped forward. She was unlike anyone Alaric had ever seen. Slender but strong, with hair the color of autumn leaves and eyes that shimmered like molten gold, she moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. There was a light in her presence that cut through the gloom of the forest, a calm confidence that made the king pause. "I do not belong to the hunt," she said softly, her voice like a melody carried on the wind. "But danger follows where you tread." Before Alaric could respond, a massive shadow lunged from between the trees, a beast twisted by dark magic, its eyes burning red, fangs glinting. The hunters froze, paralyzed by fear. The creature snarled and charged, and for the first time, Alaric realized that even he might be caught off guard. In a flash, the woman stepped forward. Her hands moved with purpose, and a pale light radiated from her touch. The beast recoiled, letting out a tortured roar, and vanished into the shadows as if it had never been there. The king's eyes widened, not in anger but in disbelief. What are you?" he demanded, his voice sharp. She bowed slightly, her expression serene. "I am someone who knows the forest and someone who understands the dangers you do not." Alaric's pride surged. He was the Alpha King, and yet he had been saved by a stranger, by a woman. His hand, which had never trembled, itched for control, for dominance, for a way to bend this enigma to his will. "You should not be here," he said, his voice low, commanding. "This is a place for hunters, for those who obey. You have no mate, no purpose here." "Why do you interfere in my affairs?" She met his gaze steadily, her golden eyes holding both warmth and challenge. "I have purpose enough to save a life," she said softly, "even a king's." For a moment, silence fell between them. The fog drifted lazily, and the only sound was the distant call of a hawk. Alaric felt an unfamiliar tension coil within him, a pull that was not desire, not anger, but a storm of something he could not name. Her calmness, her softness, her refusal to bow or tremble, it was maddening. "You speak as if you understand things beyond your years," Alaric said, stepping closer. His shadow fell over her, broad and threatening, yet she did not shrink. "Do you know what you risk? This forest, it is cursed. Many who enter never return, and you who claim to be so brave could die by the same hand that slew many kings before me." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps, but I fear not death. I fear failing to do what must be done." Alaric's chest tightened. Something about her bravery, so quiet yet so unwavering, pricked at a part of him he had long buried, the part that longed for someone to see him as more than a king, as more than a force of nature. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it a whisper of voices, ancient and eerie. They seemed to emanate from the very trees, twisting and hissing in tones only half heard. The woman's eyes flickered toward the darkness, and Alaric followed her gaze. "The curse grows stronger," she murmured. "It stirs. Soon choices will be demanded, and the king, he will have no choice but to confront it." Alaric's brow furrowed. He had known the curse was more than legend, more than threat. It was a chain upon his soul. Yet to hear it spoken aloud, to have someone else acknowledge it, sent a shiver down his spine. "And you," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "what part do you play in this?" "I am neither ally nor enemy," she said softly, her gaze meeting his fully. "I am here to guide, to warn, and perhaps to wait for what must be." The word struck him like a blade. Wait. What could she mean? And why did her mere presence make the rigid control he wielded over his kingdom and his own heart feel suddenly fragile? The fog thickened, and with it, the whispering grew louder. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting around tree trunks and roots. From the mist, a pale shape emerged, a figure draped in robes darker than midnight, its eyes glowing faintly with a cold, otherworldly light. Alaric drew his sword, the familiar weight steadying him, yet his heart beat faster than it had in years. The woman stepped forward without hesitation. Her hand rose, and the pale light shimmered again, pushing the shadowy figure back. "Go," she said to him, her voice almost a whisper yet commanding. "Do not fight alone, not tonight." Alaric's mind raced. He was a king, feared by armies, undefeated in battle, yet here, in the depths of this cursed forest, he felt powerless. And yet, he did not feel fear. Instead, he felt a pull toward her, a strange, burning need to protect her, to understand her, to unravel the mystery she carried like a veil. "You speak as if you hold my fate," he said, his voice trembling with both anger and fascination. "Do you know who I am?" "I am Alaric, Alpha King of Eldrith. No one commands me." "And yet," she said softly, stepping closer, her golden eyes meeting his, "you are bound by chains you do not see. The curse waits for you. It whispers, it tests, it demands, and soon it will claim more than your crown if you do not act." Alaric's jaw tightened. He was used to obedience, used to fear in others, used to bending the world to his will. And yet, with her, none of that mattered. She had no fear, no submission, no desire to bow, and yet her voice had power over him in a way no command ever had. A strange, heavy silence fell. Alaric could feel the weight of the forest pressing in, the shadows leaning closer, waiting. And then softly, almost tenderly, she spoke again. "You may think you have no mate," she said, her voice like a breeze through leaves, "but perhaps you simply have not yet found the one who will see you for who you are, not for who you must be." The king's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever touched the part of him that longed for something beyond power, beyond control, beyond fear. He stepped closer, the fog swirling around them like spirits dancing in the moonlight. "Do not speak of mates to me," he said, his voice low, rough with emotion he could not name. You have no idea what it means to be bound by duty, by blood, by curse." "And yet," she whispered, her hand brushing against his forearm lightly, almost as if testing the waters, "perhaps it is the curse itself that will lead you to what you seek." Alaric's eyes widened. He wanted to demand answers, to assert his dominance, to push her away or pull her closer, but the words died in his throat. All he could do was stare at her, feeling something new and dangerous stirring in his chest, something soft and fierce at once. The fog shifted again, carrying with it a low, otherworldly hum. Alaric glanced into the trees and froze. Shadows moved unnaturally, curling around one another, forming shapes that should not exist. The whispers of the forest rose, unintelligible yet hauntingly familiar, and the king realized that the curse was awakening sooner than he had anticipated. The woman's eyes shone with a strange light. "3 nights," she said softly. "The curse will demand its choice in 3 nights, and the king, he will face it, whether he wishes to or not." Alaric felt a shiver run down his spine. For the first time in his life, control slipped through his fingers. For the first time, someone's soft words, someone's quiet courage, made him lose balance in the power he had always wielded with ease. The forest seemed to hold its breath. And Alaric, Alpha King of Eldrith, who had never feared anything, now felt a flicker of something he could not name, something that both terrified and thrilled him. The woman stepped closer, and the fog curled around them, hiding them from the hunters, hiding them from the world. Her golden eyes met his, calm, steady, and unyielding. "Come," she whispered. "If you wish to survive this curse, you must trust, even for a moment, what you cannot yet see." Alaric drew in a sharp breath. For the first time, he wondered if this woman, quiet and unassuming as she seemed, might be more than a stranger. Perhaps she was the one who could awaken the part of him he had buried under power, fear, and duty. And in that instant the forest seemed to whisper back, not with malice, not with threat, but with promise. The shadows of the curse moved closer, unseen, waiting. And the Alpha King, for the first time in centuries, realized that he might not be the one in control. The castle of Eldrith loomed over the northern cliffs like a dark crown. Its towers were jagged, carved from black stone, and its walls were steeped in centuries of blood and legend. Fog clung to its ramparts, drifting through the open courtyards like restless spirits. Within its stone halls, servants moved quietly, eyes lowered, and whispers followed in shadowed corridors. But in the throne room, where King Alaric ruled with the weight of an unbroken kingdom, the air was thick not with fear, but with tension. The woman from the forest, whose name the king did not yet know, was brought before him. She walked steadily, her golden eyes unflinching as she faced the Alpha King who had demanded obedience from all who dwelled in his realm. There was no fear in her, no bowing of the head, no trembling at his presence, and that, more than any battle or decree, unsettled him. "You should not have entered my forest," Alaric said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You should not have interfered in matters beyond your understanding, and yet here you are standing before me." "I went where I was needed," she said softly, her voice steady and clear, like water running over stone, "and I will go where I am needed again. I do not seek favor, nor do I seek your permission." The king's chest tightened. She refused to yield, yet she did not challenge him with arrogance. There was a quiet strength in her words, a subtle fire that made him want to dominate her, and yet made him fear losing himself to her calm. "Do you understand the danger you court?" he asked, stepping closer. "This castle, this kingdom, even I am bound by forces beyond control. One wrong move and you will not survive. Do you still wish to remain here?" She met his gaze, unwavering. "I have faced shadows darker than this. I do not fear what is here." Alaric's hand itched toward his sword, yet he did not draw it. She had not attacked, she had not disrespected him, yet somehow her presence was a challenge more potent than any enemy he had faced. She tested him, not with force but with stillness, patience, and eyes that seemed to see the parts of him he had hidden even from himself. The king's advisors had whispered that a stranger had been found in the northern woods, and some had feared an assassin. But Alaric knew, instinctively, that she was no threat in the ordinary sense. The danger she carried was subtle, personal, a force that could pierce the walls of his heart rather than his armor. "You speak of the curse," Alaric said finally, his tone lower, almost hesitant. "Yet how can you know of it? How do you know the shadows that cling to my bloodline?" She tilted her head, her golden hair catching the flickering torchlight. "Because I have walked where the curse has walked. I have seen its hunger, and I have felt its pull. You are not the first king to face it, but perhaps you can be the one to break it." Alaric's fingers clenched at his sides. He had ruled with strength, with discipline, with fear, but never with hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope made men weak. And yet here was a woman, a stranger, offering a glimpse of it, and he felt drawn to it against his own better judgment. "You speak as if you hold answers," he said, his voice sharp now, brimming with the tension of a predator cornered. "But the curse does not yield to words. It yields to blood, to sacrifice, to dominance and will. Do you understand what it demands of me?" She stepped closer, unafraid. "I understand more than you know, and I can guide you if you will listen." The king's chest tightened. Her calm, her soft but unwavering gaze, it was maddening. He was used to commanding obedience, used to bending the world to his will, yet with her, he felt powerless. Not powerless in battle, but powerless in restraint, powerless in control of his own heart. For days, she remained in the castle under the guise of caution. Alaric allowed it, not because he trusted her, but because he could not bring himself to cast her out. The castle was alive with whispers. Shadows moved where they should not. Torches flickered with a windless gust, and servants murmured of strange visions. Yet she seemed untouched, moving through corridors and chambers as though she belonged to a world that existed just beyond the king's perception. Their interactions were brief, but charged. Every brush of hands as she handed him a scroll, every glance across the moonlit hall, every quiet word in the library, each carried a tension that neither could fully name. She challenged him without overt defiance, softened him without compromise, and slowly, the walls around his heart began to tremble. "You speak as if you know what is best," Alaric said one evening, standing on the balcony overlooking the northern cliffs. The wind whipped his cloak around him, carrying the scent of the sea and the forest beyond. "Yet you do not understand the cost. You do not understand what it means to rule, to bear this bloodline, to carry this curse." "I understand more than you think," she replied, her voice barely above the roar of the waves below. "You fear losing control, yet control alone will not save you. The curse does not bend to fear, nor to strength. It bends only to choice, and to love that is freely given." Alaric's jaw tightened. Choice. Love. Words he had long buried beneath duty, beneath expectation, beneath a cold, unyielding armor of authority. To hear them spoken now, softly, gently, stirred something dangerous within him, something fragile. Something he did not know how to handle. Days passed, and the tension between them deepened. The woman proved her worth quietly, guiding the king through the politics of his court, warning him of hidden threats and deciphering ancient texts that spoke of the curse. Yet always she maintained her independence. She never yielded to him fully, never sought to charm or manipulate. Her presence was a mirror, reflecting the king's own fears, desires, and vulnerabilities. One night, during a storm that rattled the castle walls, Alaric found her in the library. Candlelight flickered across her face, illuminating the golden sheen of her eyes and the soft determination in her expression. She held a tome of old magic, pages worn and delicate, yet filled with power. "You read these texts as though you belonged to them," Alaric said, his voice low, almost reverent. "Yet they are dangerous. They speak of things humans were not meant to touch." She looked up at him, calm, unafraid. "And yet we are not mere humans, are we? There is more at play here than mortals can comprehend. I have walked paths that even kings fear to tread." Alaric stepped closer, feeling the pull he could no longer resist. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. She did not recoil, but met his touch with a quiet acknowledgement. The air between them was electric, charged with desire, fear, and something older, something that felt like fate. "You should not have this effect on me," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "I am Alaric, Alpha King of Eldrith. I command armies, bend kingdoms, face curses and shadows, and yet you unsettle me." She smiled faintly, soft and knowing. "Perhaps that is the point," she said. "Perhaps you were never meant to face this alone. Perhaps the curse waits not for your strength but for your heart." The king's chest tightened. Every word she spoke was a thread, pulling at something deep within him that he had long ignored. Power, fear, and desire collided in ways he could not control. And for the first time he wondered, what if the curse could be broken not by strength but by trust? Not by command but by surrender. That night the storm raged across the cliffs, lightning striking the towers in sudden, brilliant arcs. Alaric stood at the balcony, staring into the swirling mist below, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The woman's words echoed in his mind, soft and insistent, choice and love that is freely given. He did not understand it fully. He could not yet see how it would unfold. But he knew one thing: he could not ignore her. He could not send her away. And the thought of losing her, or worse, the thought of allowing the curse to claim another generation of his bloodline, left him restless, aching, and unguarded. The whispers of the castle grew louder in the dark, shadows flickering unnaturally along the stone walls. Servants shivered in their quarters, sensing the stirrings of a power beyond comprehension. The woman moved silently through the corridors, aware of every presence, yet undaunted. She was both guide and enigma, light in the shadowed halls of the Alpha King's fortress. And as the first hour of night passed, a strange, otherworldly glow appeared over the northern cliffs. Alaric's eyes narrowed. He had ruled Eldrith for decades, yet he had never witnessed anything like this. The curse was awakening, and its gaze fell upon him. The woman appeared at his side, her presence quiet but steady. "It begins," she whispered. "The first choice must be made, and the king, he will not know it yet, but everything depends on what he does next." Alaric's heart pounded. He felt the stirrings of fear, desire, and uncertainty all at once. The Alpha King, unbroken and undefeated, now faced a challenge greater than any army, greater than any enemy: the stirrings of his own heart, and the unseen hand of a curse that had waited centuries to test him. He looked at her, golden eyes meeting his, calm, steady, and unwavering. For the first time he wondered if this woman, soft, strong, mysterious, might be the one to awaken what had long been buried inside him. And the shadows of the curse moved closer, unseen, waiting. The night had fallen heavily over Eldrith. The storm from the previous evening had left the cliffs slick and glistening, and the fog now rolled in thick waves across the northern forests. Within the castle walls, torches flickered and whispered shadows danced along the stone corridors. Yet it was not the storm or the darkness that weighed on King Alaric. It was the woman, the enigma whose calm courage and quiet strength had begun to stir something deep within him. Alaric stood in the great hall, staring at the northern gates. A messenger had just returned, breathless, with news of a relic long lost to the shadows of the forest. This relic, an orb carved of silver and crystal, was said to hold the power to stabilize the curse that plagued his bloodline. Without it, the curse would deepen, and his kingdom could fall. But the forest was treacherous: twisted paths, unnatural creatures, and illusions designed to lure even the strongest to their doom. He looked at the woman standing beside him. She was calm, serene, and ready. Golden eyes glinting in the torchlight, she had already packed for the journey. She carried no weapon beyond a small dagger, worn but enchanted, yet she radiated a confidence that made Alaric's chest tighten. "You insist on coming with me," Alaric said, his voice low, edged with both command and concern. "This is no place for one such as you. You do not belong in the forest's traps and shadows." "I belong where I am needed," she said softly, her gaze meeting his. "And if this relic is the key to breaking your curse, then I am needed." He could not argue with that. Yet even as he nodded, he felt the familiar tension coil inside him, the pull of desire and fear, curiosity and wariness, all entwined. The woman did not seek to bend him, and yet she commanded his attention in ways he had never known. The journey began before dawn. Horses' hooves echoed on the stone bridge leading from the castle, and the fog swallowed their figures as they passed into the forest. Alaric rode with a vigilance born of years of command, sword at his side, senses alert to the slightest movement. She rode beside him, calm, scanning the woods with an almost otherworldly awareness. Hours passed, and the forest seemed alive with whispers. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the trunks of trees, and strange shapes flickered at the edges of vision. Creatures with eyes like molten gold and bodies that shifted between solid and mist stalked them, testing their courage. At every challenge, the woman was steady, guiding, warning, and occasionally stepping forward to dispel the threat with the soft light that seemed to emanate from her very being. Alaric watched her, heart tightening. In battle, he had faced warriors, assassins, beasts, and armies, but nothing had ever unsettled him as she did. Her bravery, her serenity, her quiet insistence on standing beside him as an equal, it challenged everything he had built his life upon. He wanted to dominate her, to bend her will to his, and yet he found himself wanting to protect her, to trust her, to follow her guidance. They reached a clearing where the fog was thickest. The ground was uneven, tangled with roots and covered in moss, and the air seemed to hum with power. There, partially buried beneath fallen branches and earth, was the relic. A silver orb, etched with runes that pulsed with an inner light, lay waiting. Alaric dismounted, moving carefully toward it. But before he could reach the relic, the forest shifted. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming illusions that tested the mind and heart. Figures from his past emerged, advisors who had betrayed him, enemies who had sought his throne, visions of kings who had failed before him. Each illusion whispered doubts and fears, threatening to overwhelm his senses. The woman stepped beside him, her hand brushing his arm lightly. "Do not listen to them," she said softly. "They are not real. The forest feeds on fear. Trust yourself and trust me." Her words, simple and soft, steadied him. He realized then that the challenge was not merely physical, it was emotional, spiritual. The forest was testing his heart as much as his strength, and in that moment he understood that the curse could not be broken by force alone. It demanded clarity, trust, and a willingness to see beyond control. Together they advanced. The illusions became more insistent, whispering of failures, betrayals, and fears. Alaric's grip on his sword tightened, but he found himself listening more to her calm voice than to the insidious murmurs of the shadows. Each step forward was a test, not of skill, but of heart. When they reached the relic, the final challenge appeared. A massive creature, neither fully beast nor fully spirit, rose from the mist. Its body shimmered, shifting between shadow and solid form, eyes that burned like dying stars fixed upon them. Its roar was both sound and force, shaking the very air. Alaric prepared to strike, but she placed a hand on his chest, soft yet firm. "Not with force," she whispered. "With trust." Alaric hesitated. Every instinct screamed to attack, to dominate, to control. Yet her calm, her unwavering confidence, rooted him in a way nothing else could. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped back, lowering his sword. The woman extended her hands, light spilling from her fingers in a pale glow. The creature recoiled, twisting and shrieking, until it dissolved into mist, leaving only the relic untouched. Alaric exhaled, his chest heavy with relief and something more, a recognition that his reliance on force alone had almost failed him. He looked at her, awe and desire mingling in his gaze. How did you," he began, but she shook her head, smiling faintly. "You did not fail," she said softly. "You listened, you trusted, that is the key." For a moment they stood close, the relic between them, shadows of the forest dancing around their feet. Alaric felt the pull again, fierce and undeniable. The desire to claim her, to assert dominance, to bend the world to his will, warred with the new, alien sensation of wanting to protect, to cherish, to surrender in trust. The woman noticed his struggle, and she touched his arm lightly. "You are not alone in this," she whispered. "You never were, but the choice, the true choice, is yours alone." Alaric's chest tightened. He had lived his life ruling, commanding, and controlling. And now, in the presence of this quiet, golden-eyed woman, he faced a challenge greater than any battle, surrendering his heart without losing his pride, giving trust without yielding weakness, and confronting a desire he did not fully understand. As night deepened, they made camp in a small clearing, firelight dancing across their faces. The forest was alive with whispering shadows, yet neither slept. They spoke softly, sharing pieces of themselves they had never shared with anyone. She spoke of journeys through cursed lands, of spirits who guided the lost, of choices that shaped destiny. Alaric spoke of the weight of the throne, of battles fought and lives lost, of the loneliness that had followed him through every year of rule. In the quiet intimacy, a bond began to form, not through command nor through conquest, but through understanding, through recognition of the strengths and vulnerabilities each carried. For the first time in centuries, Alaric felt seen, fully and unguarded, and it terrified him. Hours passed and the fog thickened around them. Alaric stared into the fire, thoughts racing. The curse awaited. The relic was safe for now, yet he knew the path ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand the surrender of pride, the opening of the heart, and a willingness to trust a woman who challenged him in ways no one else had dared. Suddenly, the woman looked toward the edge of the clearing, eyes narrowing. "We are not alone," she whispered. From the mist, a figure emerged, draped in darkness, its eyes glowing faintly with an eerie light. The shape was humanoid, yet shifting, its presence radiating both menace and sorrow. The relic pulsed in response, a soft silver light as if aware of the looming danger. Alaric drew his sword instinctively, yet the woman stepped forward. "This is a test," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Not for the body, but for the heart. Face it with trust, not with steel." The Alpha King hesitated. The urge to strike, to control, to dominate surged within him. Yet her gaze held him, soft and unwavering. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his sword. The figure shimmered, eyes narrowing, then dissipated into mist, leaving the clearing silent once more. Alaric exhaled, chest heaving. He turned to her, golden eyes searching hers. You guide me as if you know the path," he said. "Yet the path is unknown. I do not even know if I can." "You can," she said softly. "If you allow yourself to see what lies beyond fear, beyond pride, beyond the chains of control. The curse will test you again, but you are ready." Alaric's heart pounded. He felt something fragile, new, and dangerous awakening within him. A desire to protect, to trust, to surrender, and yet a fear that doing so could break him. The forest whispered around them, alive with unseen eyes, unseen shadows, and unseen forces. And then softly she spoke his name. "Alaric, the choice approaches. Soon the first night will demand its reckoning. Be ready not just with strength but with heart." The Alpha King looked out into the fog, toward the unseen edges of the forest, toward the mysteries and dangers that awaited. The woman stood beside him, calm, steady, unwavering. And he realized, with a mixture of fear and longing, that the forest's greatest challenge was not the shadows, nor the curse, nor the relic, but the woman at his side who had become both his guide and his temptation. The fire flickered, casting long shadows over their faces. And as the mist thickened, carrying whispers of ancient power and warnings unspoken, Alaric understood that the night ahead would change everything. His heart, long encased in steel, was opening. And the first true test of trust, desire, and destiny was about to begin. The night was thick and silent, the kind of silence that seemed alive, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Mist clung to the castle walls and drifted through the courtyards, curling like pale fingers across the stone. King Alaric stood at the edge of the northern cliff, the relic glowing faintly in his hand, casting silver light over his features. Beside him, the woman, the golden-eyed guide, the enigma, the force that had unsettled and awakened him, stood quietly, her gaze steady on the swirling fog below. "This is it," she whispered. "The first night. The curse will demand its answer." Alaric's jaw tightened. He had faced armies, monsters, and the dark magic of the forest, yet nothing had tested him as the looming choice now did. The curse was not merely a threat, it was alive, a force that fed on fear, pride, and the hardness of his heart. It demanded surrender, trust, and the courage to face what he had long denied. He looked at her. Golden eyes met steel gray. He could see in her calm determination the challenge he could not deny. She had guided him, saved him, tested him, and stirred a fire in him he had never known. But now the final test was upon him, and it required more than strength, more than courage. It demanded his heart. The mist shifted. Shapes moved within it, darker than shadow, with eyes like embers. Whispers of ancient kings, of warriors who had failed, of the bloodline's endless chain of cursed solitude, echoed through the fog. They were not threats in the ordinary sense. They were mirrors of his fears, reflections of the consequences that awaited him if he failed. "You must face them," the woman said softly. "Not with your sword, but with the choice only you can make. The curse tests the heart, not the body." Alaric took a deep breath, gripping the relic in his hand. It pulsed with light, responding to his heartbeat, as if alive and aware of the struggle within him. He closed his eyes briefly, recalling the past days, the journey through the forest, the trials, her calm presence at his side. He realized that for the first time, someone had seen him not as a king, not as an alpha, not as a weapon of conquest, but as a man. And that recognition, fragile as it was, had begun to crack the steel around his heart. The shadows advanced. Figures emerged, twisted visions of failure and betrayal, illusions meant to frighten, confuse, and dominate. They spoke his name, whispered doubts, reminded him of solitude and loss. Every instinct screamed to fight, to dominate, to assert control. Yet he knew the truth. The only way to break the curse was not through force, but through trust. He opened his eyes. The woman extended her hand, her golden gaze unwavering. "Trust me," she said simply. "Trust yourself. Trust what you feel, not what you fear." Alaric stepped forward, hand brushing hers. The moment their fingers touched, a warmth spread through him, unlike any fire of battle or power. It was gentle, fierce, and insistent. The relic glowed brighter, and the shadows recoiled, as if repelled by the truth of his heart. "You are not alone," she whispered. "You have never been alone. You have only forgotten how to see it." He felt the weight of centuries, of kings who had failed, of a bloodline chained to despair. And yet, for the first time, he also felt hope. Not a hope born of power or fear, but of connection, of choice, of love freely given. The shadows howled, twisting and shifting, trying to unsettle him, to drive him back into pride and fear. But Alaric did not move away. Instead, he held her hand firmly, stepping forward, letting the warmth of her presence anchor him. "I choose," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "I choose to trust, to face this curse not with fear but with my heart, and I choose you." The forest seemed to hold its breath. The shadows writhed, twisted, and then, slowly, dissolved into mist. The relic pulsed once, brighter than before, and then lifted from the ground as if acknowledging his choice. Silver light cascaded across the cliff, illuminating the forest, the castle, and the two figures standing together. The woman's eyes softened, golden and glowing. "Alaric," she said, her voice trembling with a quiet emotion, "the curse, it recognizes your choice. It bends now, not through power but through love. You have broken the first chain." Alaric exhaled, chest heaving. For the first time in decades he felt free, yet not free from responsibility, free from strength, or free from duty. Free from the weight of fear that had bound his heart. He turned fully to her, face inches from hers. The storm within him had not ended. It had transformed into something tender, something fierce, something that would not be denied. "Do you understand what you have done?" he asked, voice rough with emotion. You have changed the course of my bloodline." "I only guided," she said softly. "The choice was yours, always yours." Alaric closed the distance between them. He did not need to command, to dominate, to bend her will. She stood with him willingly, as equal, as partner, as someone who had become essential to him in ways he could not yet fully name. And in that moment, the Alpha King understood that his greatest strength had never been his sword, his rule, or his power. It was his heart, finally opened, willing to risk everything for trust, for connection, for love. The relic floated between them, glowing with a silver light that pulsed in rhythm with Alaric's heartbeat. Slowly, it began to ascend, dispersing the lingering shadows and lifting the oppressive weight from the forest. The fog cleared slightly, revealing the cliffs, the trees, and the glimmer of the northern sea beyond. A calm settled over the land, a silence that was not empty but full of promise. "You have done what no king before you could," the woman whispered. "You have faced the curse not as Alpha but as a man." Alaric's chest tightened. "And yet," he said, voice low, "I would not have faced it alone. I would not have survived without you." She smiled faintly, stepping closer. "And yet it was always your choice. You allowed yourself to see, to feel, to trust. That is what the curse demanded." A silence fell between them, profound and heavy, filled with unspoken words, shared relief, and the tentative stirrings of love. Alaric reached out, brushing her hair from her face again, savoring the softness, the warmth, the reality of her presence. "Stay with me," he said quietly, not as a command but as a plea. Not as a guide, not as a protector, but as yourself. Her eyes softened, golden and shining in the moonlight. "I will," she said simply, "if you will let me." The Alpha King exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders for the first time in years. The curse had not been defeated by might, nor by fear, nor by dominance. It had been faced with choice, trust, and the courage to allow his heart to open fully. And as he looked at her, he realized that the true power of a king was not in ruling others, but in the willingness to be seen, to be vulnerable, to love. In the days that followed, the relic was returned to the castle vault, its light a quiet reminder of the night when the curse had been broken. The forest seemed to breathe more gently, the shadows no longer hostile, the whispers fading into calm. Alaric and the woman remained together, their bond forged in trials, strengthened by trust and tempered by choice. Courtiers whispered of the Alpha King's transformation. Not through force, nor conquest, but through the quiet influence of a woman who had challenged him, guided him, and finally helped him break the chains that bound his heart. And Alaric, standing on the balcony overlooking Eldrith, finally felt something he had not known in decades: peace, freedom, and the knowledge that the woman beside him was no longer a guide, no longer a stranger but his equal, his partner, and perhaps his mate. The sun rose over the northern cliffs, golden light spilling across the castle and the forest beyond. The relic's silver glow had dimmed, but its magic remained, a quiet promise that the curse had been transformed, not destroyed. The king had faced the darkness and the forest had recognized the courage of the heart. Alaric turned to her, golden eyes meeting his. A smile, small but full of emotion, curved her lips. "We have faced it together," she said softly. "Yes," he replied, voice steady and warm. "Together." The wind carried their words across the cliffs, the echo mingling with the sea, the forest, and the rising sun. The Alpha King, once bound by curse and solitude, now faced a future unchained, with the woman who had awakened his heart beside him. And in the silence that followed, the promise of love, trust, and choice stretched across Eldrith, like a light breaking through centuries of shadow. The forest watched, the relic rested, and the curse had finally found its resolution, not in power, not in fear, but in the courage to open one's heart. And the Alpha King, undefeated in battle and now victorious in love, finally allowed himself to feel, to hope, and to trust, fully and without restraint.